Okay, so we're going to start this video now. We're going to put a virtual firewall, virtual Palo Alto into Azure, and then connect through to a host server that we have, which is this Palo test host here, and we're going to RDP through the firewall to get to it. Okay, so there's quite a few things that you need to sort of get right first. So just to go over what we've already got. We've already got a virtual network for it. So we're going to put the subnets and place our firewall, and within there we've already got our host subnet which they live on. We're going to need some routing tables creating, and then we're going to have to go through the nuances of creating the routes on the firewall and so on. Okay, so to begin, we're going to create a resource, and that resource is going to be a Palo Alto next generation firewall, which makes sense. Doesn't really matter which one we go for here. If you've got your own license, and you can go for a bring your own license. I'm going to go for the pay and go bundle one because it just means it works out of the box. Don't get one and leave it running forever because it will cost you a lot of money. We're going to create a new resource group for it, which is going to be awesomely titled PAVM RG resource group. My VNet is in UK West, and then the username is going to be my name and a super secret password. Which doesn't match. Okay, that was a bit awkward, but I think we're past that now. The networking, we're going to put it in our own VNet rather than letting it create its own VNet. That's just for ease and locality for me, really. Oh. So we have our management subnets. We have our subnets created. Now, obviously, you're going to need a management subnet because you're going to need to manage the firewall. You're going to need to have a trust subnet and an untrust subnet. So you just drop them down here. I've gone for quite small subnets. So if you were to need to create one, just go to manage subnet configuration. Then you'd click to add your subnet as normal there. And then go back to creating your firewall. Network security group, which is going to be bound to. We have to remember this because this is quite important. So it's the ETH0 this is going to be bound to, because when it initially starts up, the only thing that's actually configured is the management access to it. Okay, so we're going to allow it just to create us a new firewall management public IP, and we're going to give it a DNS name. So UKWestPAVM for UK West PA Palo Alto virtual machine, and then just to give it some kind of difference. So you can select the version. Not a difference that it's going to allow. Yeah, that should be fine. So latest is just the latest image number, or you can select from one of the other images. So we'll just go with latest. If you were going to bootstrap it, you'd click yes, and you'd have to give it the storage account name and the access key, and that's where you put your config and your license files, and any files for it to go off and register. So that's where you put the file where it had the IP address of Panorama and so on in it. And then the virtual machine size is fine. We're going to accept the defaults. I'm just going to go back because it's going to fail validation because I didn't do that. Okay, so we're going to create this. And that will take a while to create, so I will pause the video and come back to it when it's created. Okay, so now it's complete. We're going to go to our resource group. And we can see now that we have a public IP address. And that also has DNS, so we're going to copy and save that. And I'm going to copy the DNS for later. Okay, so now I've got the DNS and I've got everything I need there. Now, okay, so now we can go straight to the firewall itself using the DNS name. Could do if I hadn't hit the wrong button. Okay, I'll just log on. Okay. First thing we have to do is have to set up our interfaces. Layer 3 is going to be untrust. And then the options are going to be DHCP client. Do not automatically create that. We're going to attach it to the default router. I'm going to create a zone for it, which is going to be the untrust zone. Okay. And then our trust interface, again, is going to be a layer 3. Keep hitting the wrong key. And again, because we don't want to start sending any traffic out onto the VNet itself, because then it will just bypass and it will just use the VNet's internet connectivity. I'm going to create a new zone for this. Okay, I'm just going to commit that just to make sure those interfaces come up. Whilst I'm doing that, I'll nip back to here, because what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to have a look at our firewall. Okay, so we know this is going to be the management IP. That's the management IP we're using at the minute. However, okay, so we're going to have to then go on to ETH1, which is our untrust interface. And on here, we are going to associate a public IP with it. So we're going to go to there, and then we're going to associate a public IP address. Create new. ETH1-1 public. Okay. And we're going to save that. Then it's going to go off and create it and then associate it to that interface. So that means that all our traffic now will be NATed behind that, going out to the internet. And when we want to connect in, we're going to use that. We're going to use that public IP. It's going to set up a very basic NAT rule to NAT back into the RDP session that we want to prove that this works. So I'll just pause it. It seems making a horrendous amount of time, and come back to it in a minute. Okay, so we can see it's given us this public IP here of 51.142.51.39. So that's all good. So we're going to come back here, and then there's a couple of things we need to do to prepare everything for where it's going to be. So one of the first things we need to do is we need to take this IP here. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it on my spreadsheet that you can't see. Okay, because that's going to be used now when we create the root table for the host subnet. We're going to go back, we're going to go to root tables, create a root table, and we're going to pop that in our PA VM resource group. It's going to be in UK West, and the name is going to be host pool internet. Okay, then we're going to create that. That should be fairly quick, although for some reason it does seem to be running quite slow today. Okay, but that's all done. Right, and so in here we're going to have to add a root. We're going to add a root to here. So this is going to be our default root for our hosts, our Windows hosts. /0. It's going to be a virtual appliance, and then the next top IP address is going to be our IP address of our ETH2. So what we're saying here is that the default route for the internet and so on is going to go through the firewall. Now, of course, obviously that's the default route for everything. It's going to be associated to the subnet. So associates, and then we need to associate it in that virtual network, and it's going to go on to the PA trust subnet. Okay, right, so as just a quick refresher, if we go back to resource groups, Palo Lab, and we go to the VNet, if I can find it, yep, go to the VNet, then look at our subnets. So in our subnets here, now we have our management, and that's all good, we know we can connect to that, and our untrust and our trust, we've associated. You know what? I've actually associated that in the wrong place. So we are going to go back to root tables. And we need to disassociate that with that. And then we need to just check the roots again. So the roots are to the virtual appliance. So we need to associate that, same virtual network, but it's going to go onto our host subnet, of course, because that's where it needs to be. Okay, so coming back out of there. So now we have our root, and we have our traffic from our host subnets being sent to the firewall, so we know that the route back out of there is. Okay. Coming back to the resource group, back to here, and then I can go back with what I was saying previously in the subnets. Okay, so our untrust and our trust. So we know what they're on. Now the gateway address on subnets is the first usable address. So for our PA untrust subnet, it's going to be 33, and for our PA trust, it's going to be 17. That needs to be put in here because at the minute, our virtual router doesn't know where anything is. It doesn't know how to get out. So we need to put a static route in for the default route. Okay, now we know it's going out the ETH11 interface, and the IP address for that is going to be the 10.1.1.33. Okay, so I have that, and then we need another route because we have like a small transit network between the back end of the firewall and the hosts. And we know that the host subnet is 10.1.0.0/24. Space is E2. And that particular subnet is 10.1.1.17, as we said. Okay. So now we have our routes in. And we'll just commit that. Actually, I won't commit that. What I'll do is I'll do the policies. So our security policy, the first thing I like to add with a security policy is the deny log rule, which is source any silly. Okay, so that's deny there, and then we're going to add another rule above that, which is our internet access rule. And it's going to be from trust to untrust, application any, application default, allow, and log at session end. And it's going to place it underneath that, which is quite annoying. So we can move to the bottom. Okay. You would really sort of, we're only ever going to have the two zones. So it is sort of trust to untrust, but they are still universal rules. Okay, so we've got that going there, and then we just need to do our NAT policy, which is going to be our hide NAT, which is going to be our original packet coming from trust, going to untrust, translated packet, dynamic IP and port, translated address, interface address. We know our interface is the811. Okay, we don't need an IP address for that. Okay, and I'm going to commit that. And then once we commit that, we should then be able to see the amount of traffic that comes off a box when it's just not doing anything, because we should see the traffic then coming through from the host behind. So I'll just pause out whilst it commits. Okay, then so as you can see, we've now got some traffic. So if we just go not equals deny, we can see now that we have traffic coming from our box, going out. And it's being natted to a 2150 3.68. So that's the destination it's going to, and then we can see that the NAT's working because you're getting TCPR resets from the client. So these are all graciously ended connections, TCP FIN, so we know that there's two-way communication. We can also see the problem with putting anything on the internet, which is you get untrust to untrust traffic almost immediately, and it's just part of it, really. It's something to be aware of, that when you fire it up, you'll see lots of traffic as a byproduct of having this rule in, that you wouldn't normally see. So now we know that that can get out. What we need to do now is we need now to get the traffic in to RDP. So we're going to put in a rule above this. See if I can type it properly. And that is going to come from untrust to trust. Now, destination address is going to be the ETH11 external address, because that's how NAT and security policies work. So it's the post-NAT zone, pre-NAT IP. Then we're going to add the application, which in this particular instance is going to be MSRDP. Yeah. Application defaults, yes, allow, and log. I'm going to move it to the top. Okay, and then our NAT rule is going to be our RDP in NAT. Not that you really need that because it's in the NAT rule section, so it makes sense that it's NAT. So it's going to be anything from our untrust zone to our untrust zone to ETH11, destination address being ETH1 external, and then the translated packet is going to be static IP. Translated address we're going to put in a new address because that's going to be our RDP host. And the address of that host we know, well, I know, is 10.1.0.4. Okay, and we'll leave the port alone, and that way it will just leave the port that's there. Move that to the top because I do like my more specific rules at the top rather than the bottom. So what we're saying there is from untrust to untrust, hitting destination interface 1.1 on that IP. We're going to translate it to the RDP host destination, and the way our rules run is anything going from untrust. We know our host is on the trust zone, but it's hitting that IP address because that's done post-NAT, pre-NAT, using MSRDP, and we're all good. And we know we've got our rules, and we know we've got our routes, so we'll just commit that and see if it works. Okay, so now that's committed successfully, and we can check our monitor. Okay, now so if we now go back over the configuration, which I have done, so in Azure I've found the external IP, which is under this one here, so it's actually under the resource group, and then we can look in there. We can see that within the resource group we've got the ETH11 public that we said, and then we've got that there. So I just pop that into my my remote desktop connection, fire it up, and then all things being equal, we can get through to the test host and although it's going to run very, very slow because it's a very, very small instance, we now know that's going through our firewall because we can see from the firewall, go to monitor, not deny it, allow, and there we go. And we've got my my VPN address, which is that one there, MSRDP, and we're connected to the 10.1.1.36. And then if we look in here, we can see the destination and the NAT IP sorry, to 10.1.0.4. And NAT port stays the same because 3389, which is the one that we've connected on. So that's it. That's how to quickly set it up in Azure. There is, I don't know whether to do a video on the failover, the HA side of things, HA configurations, because you would tend to use VMSS. I don't have a Panorama instance, so I can't use VMSS because that is specifically required. But we'll look into that later. I don't know, maybe leave a comment, and if you want the HA one doing, then do the HA one as well. So thanks for watching. Cheers, and I'll see you in a bit.